One more time, welcome to Defender Fridays, everybody. This is a very bittersweet episode for me because, as I mentioned to you all last week, this is actually my final episode as the primary host of the show. As we look to sort of diversify, continue to change things up, and bring some new names, new faces in to keep our community alive and well. After this week. Maxine from our team is going to be stepping in and bringing kind of a new perspective. I mean, Maxine's done some really incredible, impressive things in his career, and has some really unique insights. And so I'm excited about it. I'm excited to see what he's able to bring to the community. And of course, that doesn't mean I'm disappearing. It just means I won't be the primary front runner of the show every week from here on out. But I'm absolutely thrilled. I'm not just saying this. I'm absolutely thrilled that for the guest of my final episode is someone that all of you know because he's such a common face on these shows, Jeff McJunkin. He's always got just the most insightful things to add to the conversation. And he's hosted before. He's always bringing really cool, really fun, and oftentimes edgy topics, hot takes. And I love him for that. Jeff is not afraid to say the uncomfortable truths, but to say them in a qualified way, to bring actionable advice and guidance. And Jeff, I love you for that. Thank you for saying yes, because I know you just had a baby last week. Matter of fact, you joined Defender Fridays last week from the hospital. We got to see newborn Elliot, and I was like, wow.
Totally hijacked.
Yeah. Even among the biggest of life events, this guy drops in and says hi to this community. So, Jeff, thank you for saying yes, because I'm sure you'd much rather be sneaking in a nap right now. And not only did he say yes to coming on, but he said, you know what, like, Eric, I want to do something a little ambitious. I want to come in with 14 topics that I want to run through, split down the middle, things I love and things I hate about InfoSec, but captured in a way that hopefully gives folks some guidance on maybe where to focus and maybe where not to get lost in the weeds or in the trenches of InfoSec. So I know you got a lot to get through, Jeff, so I'm going to shut up and let you talk, sir, and I'm excited to go on this adventure with you.
Perfect. I have 28 minutes and 14 topics. So I got 2 minutes each. Can we go ahead?
Well, I was just about to say, who's going to post all the links if you're talking?
Still me. It's fine.
Okay, cool.
All right. So, hi, everyone. Today is February 14th, Valentine's Day. So it's about love, but, spicy takes. So let's add some hate in there. So I made it even. 7 things to hate and 7 things to love for Valentine's Day. Perhaps rephrasing 7 things that are common focuses that are useless and a waste of your time for the vast majority of organizations, and 7 things that are overpowered and don't get nearly as much attention as they should. So let's start off with spicy take number 1. CVSS scoring is bullshit for the average organization. CVSS scoring is wonderful for being able to look at industry trends and vulnerabilities over time, but that is not something your average organization cares about. So let's just start off with that, with a hard, stronger take. And feel free to jump in audio, but chat's probably a little easier just because there's a lot to go over, but I'm not going to stop you from doing audio as well. All right. So continuing on in a very similar vein, most CVEs and the focus on CVEs, on patchable flaws in our industry, is for most organizations by far not the best use of time. I'm not going to quite say like useless, but the vast majority of CVEs that you should care about are unauthenticated remote code execution, especially exposed to the public internet. And how many of those come across not named Fortinet?
So, I was going to say, in other words, edge devices.
Yeah, things that you expose to the public internet, you should be aware of your public-facing attack surface. Absolutely, I'm with you there. As an attacker, once I get internal access, then sure, all of the internal remote code execution or information disclosure, an open NFS share with a whole bunch of goodies inside, including like the domain controller backup or the domain controller live machine or iSCSI, things like that, like features that allow for useful information disclosure. I don't discount those entirely, but focusing on CVEs is counterproductive for most organizations. You know I like analogies, so here's the analogy for this one. You might be familiar with things like Hurricane Katrina, right? And when we have something that bad, we no longer use that particular name. But can you imagine if we named every single cloud, if we had an assigned number for it? It doesn't matter if there is a a dirt devil in Kansas if your location is California, right? It doesn't matter if there's a CVE for a product that you don't use. Focusing on those doesn't really help you. Then again, even doubling down on a very common misconception, many breaches take advantage of 0 or maybe 1 or maybe 2 patchable flaws. Right? Features from start to finish is absolutely a common way for attackers to go from 0 to breach. There are features for code execution. Go ahead, Eric.
And to just add another analogy, because I imagine there's folks sitting here thinking, but wait a minute, I have an entire vulnerability management program that's dedicated to focus on this. Like, I would also say it's similar to let's imagine you have a wooden ship, right? And the wood it's starting to rot and you're getting leaks, and you have a full team whose job is dedicated to taking buckets of water and pushing it out of the ship, right? That's your vulnerability management strategy. What if instead the idea is, let's reinforce the hull of the ship, right? Like, identity-aware proxies in front of edge appliances or in front of internet-facing things. Now, when the CVEs pop up, because they will forevermore, we're actually less worried about it because we've got steel wrapped around our wooden hull. You know what I mean? So we're our first priority is not buckets of water out of the boat. It's building that reinforced hull.
Yeah,
right?
let's worry less about our build rate capacity, like how many gallons per minute, and like maybe let's plug the damn leaks. All right, so I'm going to do things a little bit out of order just because I think it might help things relate a little bit better. I hate stats as they're commonly used in many organizations, like, what percentage of people clicked on the phishing link? I think it's a useless vanity metric, so I'm going to start there. How about this as a goal? We should probably have ability to detect and change and manage and patch all of our devices. Is that a good thing? So as far as statistics, what percentage of endpoints in your environment have you received logs from in the last 24 hours? What percentage of endpoints have you patched in the last month? This is auto patching. Like, it's not as an attacker, I care about maybe a dozen vulnerabilities per year. All right. I don't care about the vast majority of patching. However, I care about organizations that refuse to patch so much because they will always have more problems. I'm thinking to a certain friend of mine who had an organization where they refused to patch VMware tools in their environment. And I don't care about VMware tools. I care that the organization refuses to patch at all for months at a time. Oh, it's internal only, therefore nobody cares, right? What percentage of endpoints can you manage out of band? Right? Do you have something like the Velociraptors or the EDRs that no matter the device, if it's Windows, Linux, Mac OS, we can gain telemetry on it, we can configure it, and we can make changes on it. We can move quickly enough. And the last one, and a bit more difficult, but what percentage of endpoints, including servers in your environment, do you have a documented process to rebuild? If I could point at one device and say, this no longer exists, what's your time to recover? And what percentage of your endpoints can you recover? Now, many desktops are going to get a higher percentage there, so maybe focusing more on the server side will help you there. But continuing to look at chat, feel free to chime in as we go. Oops, we deleted prod again. Yeah, I would love to have more bosses for the physical server and to say, hey, everyone, you said you have redundancy, so how much do you trust it that I can come in once per Wednesday and unplug any one cable? Oh, you're not as confident anymore? Then we need to work on it, right? Redundancy, nobody cares about backups. People care about the ability to restore. Nobody cares about the idea of resiliency. They care about what can I do? What can I trust? What processes have we been through? What reps have we done? All right, biannual disaster recovery testing, Marco mentions.
And folks, let me just say, a tabletop conversation can only go so far. Right? There's a lot of hand waving that happens in those types of situations. Oh, yeah, we would just do XYZ. Okay, but have you ever actually done XYZ? Do you know that it would go the way that you say it would? No,
I'm going to plug a conversation that happened just yesterday. Thursday Defensive was on tabletop exercises, and one of the takes there was, hey, that's Scooby led that one, so nicely done. We should probably focus at least, as a minimum, the amount of time you spent at the tabletop of a few quick checks inside your environment. The capabilities you claim to have for the purpose of the tabletop, prove for the purpose of everyone here and the purpose of documentation and sharing that knowledge that we can actually do that. If not, then that ability is taken away from you for the sake of the next tabletop until we can prove it. So it sounds like it might be a priority to add that actual capability.
On the topic of phishing awareness tests, though, Jeff, I think a lot of folks generally agree at this point, and the data is starting to surface that's in support of the argument that phishing awareness is a mostly useless, vanity metric driven activity. But I think it summarizes a bigger problem in IT and security where we look for the easy button that makes us feel like we're doing something, because the actual effective approach is harder, right?
Like what gets measured gets managed. Like it's real easy to get a graph that starts at a high 30-40% rate and see it go down to 2 or 3 and said, look, I made things 10 times better. Right. However, the fact that you hire people that are trying to be helpful is a feature. Like the fact that some people will click on links or open attachments or help people that they legitimately believe they are helping to do the purpose of the business, that's a feature. That is a design constraint for security. The fact that you allow quick assist, which I've harped on before, or you allow people to install and run TeamViewer or AnyDesk or AnyDesk or a few others remote management software without even those don't require admin rights. The fact that you allow those is an IT decision. Just because it's default doesn't mean it's a secure way to do things. So that's a problem you can solve. You can never make it to 0% for phishing ever. I don't fundamentally object to like on penetration tests. I will prove that phishing works. Look, some people click the link. Hey, look, some payloads make it through. Hey, look, calling people works. But that's just more to prove the point that of course it works. So let's focus on what happens afterwards. Sure, minimize the percentage, but it's not your best use of time. Continuing on a few hates. Most physical pen tests are not the good use of your dollars. How many millions of dollars were lost in ransomware in the last year? How many of those millions could be attributed to the physical attacker was physically on site? I think 5 or fewer in the last year. And one of them was a cool one of they hacked the building next door so they could jump on the wireless. So I'll still count that under the physical side, but mostly it's not a good use of your time to have somebody scoping out the environment. I got to do it. I got to put on the this high-vis jacket and come in during the day to the employee break room and eat one of their bananas. It tasted of victory. It was amazing, but it was not a good use of my client's time or money. I was subcontracting, for the record.
In my opinion, it's a fundamental misunderstanding of your threat model, right? We all like to watch the spy TV show and think that, you know, we're like that. We need to worry about their not even close, right? When you've got vulnerabilities in edge appliances and things like that, nobody's sitting in the parking lot brute forcing the Wi-Fi. You know, nobody's using the fish tank to hack into the casino unless you're a casino, right? Like, so I wholeheartedly agree, man.
All right, I'm going to move over to the love side just for the sake of time, but I'll quickly say the last hates. Most vulnerability scans, like, hi, you have an outdated PHP. Hi, you have TLS warnings. Qualys SSL Labs didn't give us an A+, therefore let's fix that. That is a bullshit use of your time, and about anything else would be better. Now, I don't object to unauthenticated periodic scans, and we look for, Nessus has, for example, the checkbox of has public exploit. And for the most part, if it doesn't meet that criteria, it's probably not worthy of your time, other than, hey, we have devices that we're not managing. Let's fix that underlying problem. Let's turn on automated patching wherever possible so we don't have to think about it going forward. So most vulnerability scans. Oh, and last hate is exact signature-based detection as a primary detection method. I don't care that you have the known hash of Mimikatz 2.1.1 blocked inside your environment. I care far more about patterns of bad. Is something beaconing? There was a great discussion about TLSH a couple of weeks ago, right? I don't care what the binary is exactly. I care that its fuzzy hash, if you will, is close to what we've seen for known attacker tooling, even if it's renamed, even if it has a few bits changed. Go ahead, Eric.
Jeff, so there's kind of two sides of a spectrum that I think about when doing detections, right? And the spectrum goes from brittle to resilient, right? Where I can write a very brittle rule, like to your point, where it's looking for one hash, right? Or one process name or whatever. And to your point, like that thing is it's laser specific, but it's not going to live for very long because that IOC is not going to live for very long. Whereas a much more resilient approach is thinking of all the ancillary sort of telltale signs of that thing, right? I'm not looking for mimikatz.exe or the hash. I'm looking for an unexpected process accessing run or LSAS, right? And just being more resilient in my detection engineering. It's kind of my thought process. I don't know if that aligns with kind of your.
Yeah, so there's some that I don't mind, but I had the qualifier of primary. I don't mind.
Yeah.
Hey, anywhere in your environment that you see process arguments with seqrlsl past the hash PTH, like, hey, look, somebody is mimikatzing. You should probably know about that. I get it, but as an industry, we tend to focus on let's build really tall walls. Let's focus on our preventive controls and never ever monitor to see who's trying to get around, under, over, through the walls, right? Focusing on detective controls instead is a much better use of your time. And static detections, brittle detections, it's kind of like buying threat intel that like you might find a little bit with it, but for the most part, you're catching the least common denominator threat actor at best. And that's really honestly pretty ambitious for threat intel, where mostly you bought an IP, the IP address that has been burned in a prior campaign will probably never be used again maliciously. You bought a subset of Vultr and DigitalOcean IP addresses. Congratulations. I hope you're happy. Let's get over to the love side, and comments as we go. Always love them. Love number one. Critical security control number one, hardware inventory. You cannot secure what you are not aware of. Right? So we need to have a better idea of what devices are under your control, because generally speaking, we tend to focus on host-based telemetry. And therefore, if I, the attacker, am operating from an unmanaged machine, other than breaking production, there is nothing I can do to get caught. So once I get onto an unmanaged machine, you're effectively blind to me, right? There are no invisible attacks, but if you're not looking on that endpoint, you're in a bad situation. Now let's talk about things that help you in terms of ongoing timing. Automated patching, right? Turn that sucker on until you have a damn good reason to monitor. And if you do choose to turn off automated patching, then know that you're adding additional workload in your environment. You cannot turn off automated patching and ignore it for the rest of your life, which is so often the way to do things. Like, oh, we patch desktops automatically, but servers we manually do. No, you don't. You say you manually do it, but actually it's more likely for a machine to be patched because it was redeployed than it is because you patched it. So that's a problem. So let's talk about how to affect change. Change control is definitely on the love side. How does change control work? The best way to implement a change is when you have the telemetry already of this is what I want to change. Let's say it's disabling DNS fallback abuse protocols, LLM&R, NetBIOS, the responder style attacks. Well, based on our environment, we tested it inside of IT, and we want to turn this on 10% of this broadcast domain, this subnet, this department. However, we've already done Wireshark in there, it's broadcast, and we can see no DNS fallback requests have come out for anything useful inside this environment. So we know that when we make this change and disable those protocols, that nothing will break. However, we're only doing 10% this first week just to try things out after we've already tested inside our environment. Okay, 1 week later, move to 50%. 1 week later, move to 75%. 1 week later, move to 100%. It's okay for journeys to take lots of steps. Just keep walking. And again, the easiest change to make is when you have the telemetry as to what will, like me being able to say, this will not break things. I looked back 3 months in the logs and we've never required this, but it's a common thing for attackers. Case in point, Kerberostable accounts, user accounts with service principal names. Hey, look, you can find out if service tickets have been issued against those service principal names, turn on service ticket logging. And then 1 month later, say, nobody's used this in the last month. Can we turn it off? And by the way, we can re-add it. This is not an all dogs go to heaven situation. You can go back. Like it's just an attribute on an account, just like the description is an attribute on an account. We'll apply hot takes here. Just as normal energy. Thanks, Christina. Okay, centralized logging. If you don't know what's running on your endpoints, you're boned from an InfoSec perspective. Start off with CISA's logging made easy. In fact, you should have, along with whatever AV, EDR, centralized SIM, SIEM, whatever, you should also have Sysmon, and you should also have Windows Event Forwarding. And you should also turn on the useful Windows event logs. So while I'm at it, there's also, what's the Japanese Hayamoto?
Hayabusa, yeah,
Hayabusa,
he's got a batch script that'll automatically configure all the best hits of Windows event logs, and it runs well. You just boom, run it, and it GPOs.
It's that one. Enable Windows log settings. I have linked a batch script to that to computers inside an entire domain. Look, yes, test things a bit first, but it's enabling Windows event logs and enabling a non-batshit crazy maximum size, because it defaults to 10 megabytes still or something stupid. So a gig, 4 gigs, 10 gigs of local logs is not going to hurt you production-wise. We have terabyte machines at the absolute littlest now. So link that, install Sysmon with Sysmon modular, and there's a great set of places to start off there. And I added logging made easy already. Did I not do logging made easy?
I think you did. Yeah,
I did. Okay. I just already shared too many links past it. My bad. But they have strong recommendations on here. Import this group policy. Add a new Windows server. Do these things to enable Windows Event Forwarding. Okay, now you enable the filter, and now you have, hey, look, all of the logs of all managed Windows endpoints. Everything that can process group policy is now sending you good logs. Oh, and by the way, they also add WinLogBeat or similar to get everything in front of an ELK stack with a very sane configuration. I think the Erics of the world would be so much happier if an organization that did incident response against had that as a baseline compared to, I don't know, whatever Windows logs by default, I guess, which is like the 90% situation. All right.
PowerShell download Cradle to install Sysmon. Evil. Yeah. I love it.
What could possibly go wrong? Jesse Moore, let me just swap out that GitHub GIST link to my own, and we'll see what happens. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But I mean, we're getting to another hot take, spicy take. We would be better off as an industry if AV and EDR didn't exist and we instead focused on application control. Hot take.
Oh boy, all day long, man.
There is an infinite universe of possible notepads, an infinite universe of possible Mimikatz. You will never perfectly distinguish the two. There is literally the halting problem that we can't prove whether a given program will end or not. If we can't prove a program will end, how in the hell are we supposed to figure out that something is malicious or non-malicious? Is Task Manager malicious? It could be used maliciously, right? We could take process memory captures with Task Manager. Is PSExec malicious? Oh, it depends on how it's used, right? At a sufficient attacker capability, no one indicator is this is bad or this is not bad. It's all like, I love to play the game of make Katie Nichols be confused of, is this an attacker or is this just a confused sysadmin? Is this the attacker or is it Jeff making a backup? Reg save HKLM \Sam to save out the local registry hives for the security accounts manager where password hashes are stored. Is that malicious? Not intrinsically. Can it be used maliciously? Oh, hell yeah. All right. Or make a volume shadow copy and access just the point-in-time snapshot of the hive, which, by the way, is not me running reg save, which might trick off the Erics of the world. But I'm going to bet that the Eric Capuanos of the world would not notice someone accessed a volume shadow copy of C Windows drivers, C Windows 72 drivers, etc hosts, or SAM, to access the prior copy of the security accounts manager registry hive. So drop in tradecraft while I'm at it.
Oh, I'm on that technique, Jeff. I'm sorry.
Really?
I'm on that technique because it's a known common bypass. It's a known common bypass to get access to things that are otherwise locked. Yeah. So.
But what if no, I'm not just copying that one file, by the way, because if I copy the entire thing, now I'm just making a backup over the network of a whole bunch of stuff that happens to include what I'm actually interested in. I'm casting a wide net knowing that I just want a couple things inside. But yes, don't get me wrong. If I'm up against Eric, I will absolutely leave indicators because all actions are observable actions.
But you're 100% right, though, that's one of the things that's going to get by 99% of detection teams. 100%.
Reg save is usually good enough, but volume shadow copy will get you 95% of the way there, unless you
Ultra
are up
stuff.
against specifically Whitney. Eric will let it
Ultra
slide,
stuff.
but Whitney will not. And then I think I said the out-of-band management good capabilities like Lima Charlie, like Velociraptor, like EDR on every single managed endpoint. If you can't make changes to your environment, if you can't gather data from your environment, solve that problem just about first. The absolute way to start here is install Velociraptor on a box on DigitalOcean, and give it a domain name, and it will automatically do Let's Encrypt and re-enroll for you. And it'll also give you an MSI that you can deploy via group policy. Poof. Now every machine that processes group policy, you can do real-time incident response against. You can reconfigure. It's an amazing remote access Trojan. I mean, incident response tool. Turns out that's the same thing mostly. Velociraptors don't say poof. I mean, arguably they probably say more like cheap cheap, because most dinosaurs are more similar to our birds nowadays. But I'm going to say that baby Velociraptors say cheap cheap, and that should be the new slogan for Velociraptor. And the last on the positive side, before we have a little bit of discussion for the end here, is building a lab environment, because you can't change if you don't know how to change. And you should rightfully be afraid of just YOLOing change in production. But if every member of your organization that makes changes has their own lab environment, and you may have one shared for different sections of your team, and you say, hey, boss, I played with, let's say, laps inside of my own lab environment. Then I deployed it amongst my team that week, and it worked great. Now I want to do the third deployment in production in a subset of our environment. That's going to go over a hell of a lot better than, hey, I read a blog post about changing the schema of Active Directory. Can I do that? Does that sound cool with you?
I love it.
Involved extending the schema.
I've got a lot of strong thoughts about that. I'm a huge fan of it. And I think one of the ways that a security team can maybe get closer to this desired state of a lab environment, I don't necessarily think like home labs are one thing, folks. That's not what we're talking about here. I think what we're talking about is an enterprise version of that, right? Where you're replicating as much of your internal corporate environment as you can. I'm not saying one-to-one. I'm just saying that you have some of the same key systems, some of the same sort of components, and you can get buy-in and share the load here by communicating with the IT team about the shared mutual benefit of this, right? Hey, you guys can use this to do patch testing. We can use it to make sure our controls work, right? Like you kind of get some mutual ownership, and suddenly you're closer to attaining the goal.
Yes, and don't let perfect be the enemy of good. And starting with any lab environment, I'm a big fan of the old school detection lab that I'll link here. But there's also game of Active Directory, more on the offense side. But it's an Active Directory environment with a domain joined box. And SCCM and a few other things like Active Directory certificate services. And for the most part, many of the changes you want to make just require a domain and internet and a domain joined client to test with. Yes, add more labs with higher fidelity, but also the nice thing about the off-the-shelf labs is you don't mind breaking them. And I'd rather you have a mechanics card that you don't mind breaking so that you're willing to learn. Because if it's a big pain to spin up that lab, and therefore I'm not going to deal with it, then you're not going to be in a good situation. Ludus.cloud is a great example as well. Thank you, Jesse. And I have more words on that subject, but I'm running out of time. bit.ly/kickasslab is my other presentation on building out a lab environment, which also has a YouTube recording that I'll share now. I have a minute left. We hit all 14.
Yeah. Jeff, there wasn't enough anxiety in this one. Can you come up with anything that might actually bring some anxiety to some folks here that are trying to figure out what to do next? I'm kidding.
Let me reiterate. No. Let me reiterate that attackers don't have to use malware. Attackers don't have to use new binaries. They can use pre-existing stuff. Default features are built for compatibility everywhere. That's what Microsoft is financially incentivized to do. So instead, focus on what subset of features do we not use, and can we easily turn off? What do we have the telemetry on? Add that logging. Ha!
Yeah. So Jeff, up to you. Somebody said it in chat. I was just thinking it. And I know you've got these 14 written down. Up to you if you want to drop those into Slack, just for folks to reference. I'm surprised there's one that didn't make the list. I'm surprised, but it probably falls into the brittle detections. Geo-IP blocking.
Oh, yeah. So source IP address is not a good indicator. Yeah, absolutely. I have
Awesome.
it's slightly too big for the Zoom chat, so I'll post it inside the Lima Charlie Defender Fridays. Which, by the way, make sure you're registered so you can get a shirt at the end because we do a random drawing. I'm also a Lima Charlie employee. I have the shirt. Can't prove me wrong.
Oh, he's masquerading. We're losing the physical pin test already. All right. Hey, folks, thank you so much for joining us. Jeff, thank you so much for this wildly action-packed last half hour. We'll drop the notes in Slack as we always do, folks, so head on over there after the show. Check it out. Guys, thank you so much for letting me be your host for the last something like 57 episodes of this show. I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'll still be here. I'll continue to see you guys and say hello. But next week, Maxie will be taking the reins. So we'll see you same time, same place, just with a new face. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great rest of your Valentine's Day, and have a great weekend.
Happy Valentine's.